I feel like I'm far away.
Hi everyone.
There you
Yeah, it was as we go live with Jason's eyes right up his webcam. So how's it going? It's July. It's hot as balls in Michigan. Welcome to episode 9, our Stouts and Porters episode. Just continuing on the style series, I guess we're calling it. We recently decided this week we're probably gonna like redo the way we've been naming episodes. Just to make it easier, like we kind of were doing like 0.5 episodes for a little while, and having those kind of be like off-topic episodes, and then having like the numeric episodes being like the interview episodes. But we decided that was kind of annoying, so we're just gonna have them all be iterative now, and just kind of either have like topic or interview or whatever like at the beginning of the episode number, just to kind of have everything make a little bit more sense. Kind of made a little bit more sense to us too.
Yeah,
But
I flexed my YouTube and Facebook muscles today and figured out how to rename.
yeah, they're all renamed. So yeah, if you go
They're-
back and search them, it should make a little bit more sense today, I think. But hey, so before we even get started, I have a surprise for Jason and Jordan. I have a question for you guys.
Uh-oh.
Let me see if this will work here. So I want you to tell me.
Is this a pop quiz?
It is. Well, sort of. I'm curious.
I'm not in college anymore. All right, let's do it.
I haven't drank enough for this shit.
I know. All right, so we got a picture on the screen.
All right.
Which one's a stout and which one's a porter? I want you guys to.
Okay, I get where you're. I think I get.
I can
tell me why.
Which one's CO2 and which one's nitro.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I was looking at the head too.
I know I couldn't find very, very like good pictures. These were the most representative of a point that I wanted to make right as we got the episode started. So
there is no difference. So you're the bad part here is I spent 9 hours today at work on a conference call troubleshooting a rollout we just did, and so I spent most of my time actually reading up, because I didn't want to make some mistake and start talking about comparing stouts to porters when in reality I've got all kinds of notes and websites pulled up, dude. So there is no difference. Historically, there's no difference. There was actually a craft brewing business, which is a brewing conglomerate website, sent a survey out, I think last year I read, and they surveyed most of the breweries in America, and the answer that came back from the breweries was there is no fucking difference.
I'll take that.
So
what do you think, though, if you had to guess? And I'll come back to this picture again later in our conversation.
I really would say, because of the glass and the head, I would say the one on the on my right, your left, I guess, would be Guinness. So that's a stout.
Yep.
Although that in itself is wrong, and then the other one would be a porter.
If they had to, maybe they're both stouts. I don't know. This could be a trick question, Jason.
Hey, it's true. But I say it's a trick because even Guinness, which I learned in my massive reading today, Guinness was originally branded a porter. So if that really is a Guinness,
I do remember seeing that. Yeah.
Then what? So go with it, Brian. Which one's which?
No. We'll get back to it later. So I wanted to bring that up right now because we'll talk about what we think the differences between stouts and porters are, if any. Which you're making a very good point of saying that there isn't one. So
I was really hoping that you were gonna come up with some surprise in my brews T-shirt that Shayna made or something.
Yeah, that's what
I got all excited.
We'll see. Maybe I'll have more surprises tonight.
Oh,
She's
no.
yeah. Well, what are you guys drinking? I haven't cracked my first one yet, so I'm gonna do that while you guys tell me.
So cute. I'm drinking my Drew's watching, so I am drinking my adequately carbonated milkshake IPA that I made with Brambling Cross and Mosaic to get the blueberry blackcurrant kind of essences. So this is a berry creamsicle IPA. that's now carbonated.
Very, very dark and stout-like.
Yeah, looks like it. Yep.
After I finish this, I'm switching over to Guinness because
it's the atypical stout that everybody probably had. It's the first dark beer that most of us probably had, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
How about you, Jordan?
I'm actually on point and on style today, unlike the last few.
I like your glass.
Yeah, my little glass horn. Kind of impractical to drink out of. I'm pretty sure it's just a showpiece. Don't know if I should be drinking out of it, but that's what I had in my office. Yeah, so I'm drinking one of my own stouts. This is my Pug Stout. It's an Irish stout. Yeah, I think I went a little in this variant. I think I went a little heavy on the roasted malts. It tastes a little dark.
That's an award-winning beer, there, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So jump into this. Brandon brings up a good point. So Brandon says someone once told me that malted the difference between stouts and porters, where one was malted roasted barley and the other one was non-malted roasted barley, and that's actually in my studying.
Y'all motherfuckers are getting ahead of me here. Like I wanted to go back into the difference and have it be like, yeah, so look at the head, look at the color.
Yeah,
no, that's absolutely right.
So, but this explanation is actually came from the same survey that I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The American breweries came back and said if there was any difference in their opinion, and for American stouts, that is, the difference would be, stouts and porters, I should say, the difference would be between malted and non-malted roasted barley.
So with the malted being things like Black Prince, Black Malt, like I think the Carafas, maybe? I don't know if Carafas or not.
I believe Carafas are malted, they're just dehusked.
Okay.
But I'll have to double check that.
Well, there's Carafa and there's Carafa Special. The Special are the dehusked ones. But yeah, so the one on the right, I guess, it's actually not Guinness. That came from another brewery. I still have it pulled up here, but
is it Murphy's?
I don't know what it is. But yeah, that is the stout, and roasted barley gives stouts like Guinness that sort of like lighter, whiter head, whereas typically more like dark roasted. Well, it's not malt, but the roasted barley unmalted gives it that white head, and the actual malted stuff and the caramel malts and the chocolate malts and stuff typically lends to those dark colors. So yeah.
So would that lend? So we were just talking about the difference between malted and unmalted.
So actually, hold on. So maybe this is Guinness. The place I took that picture from is some like Czech website. I can't even like read any of this, so it could be. Yeah. What were you saying, Jordan?
Oh, so I mean, I was just saying. So since Guinness uses unmalted and was originally branded a porter, does that follow along with what Jason was saying and the difference between the two being malted and unmalted barley?
So everything used
Guinness
to be a porter.
originally being a porter.
Yeah.
Everything started out as a porter, and they in England they started using the term stout to refer to a stronger or a double or an extra.
A stout porter.
Yeah, so that was higher alcohol, stronger flavors, and that's where Guinness, and I had it here somewhere, but Guinness, I think in the late 1800s, decided that they fit more into that category, and they rebranded Guinness Stout from Guinness Porter. But it was originally stout meant strong, and if you go back and read which I know they're not officially what a beer is supposed to be, but if you read the highlights between BJCP, so first off, BJCP doesn't have really any stout or porter categories. They have individual style categories: Irish stout, English stout, or sweet stout.
American porter.
But they have, the only category is American, and it's American has category 22A, I think, is American porter, and 22B is American stout.
It's 20A and 20B. Sorry,
20.
I'm looking at it right here.
Okay, yep. I knew it. I'm pulling it from memory. So, so 20A and 20B, but if you compare the notes between the styles, the IBU ranges overlap significantly, with stout being just slightly higher. The SRM ranges overlap, quite a bit. even the ABV, the perceived ABV or the actual ABV, whatever you want to call it, is they're literally identical. With the tasting notes, the aroma, and some of the more detailed notes talking about just a stronger, more pronounced flavor in stout versus porter. So, but really, after reading them today, I thought, man, this is stupid that there's 2 categories. Especially, I think I've got it up now. When the IBUs and the SRMs, they're virtually the same. Yep. So.
Yeah, I mean, even as you said, ABV. I mean, high-end ABV for porter is 6.5 and 7 for stout. So. Yeah,
that range 4 point. So porter's 4.8 to 6.5, and stout's 5 to 7. Why?
Yeah. So that's interesting. So I guess what we're just seeing is kind of a social or a community, conglomerating the 2 styles into kind of one.
It's like pale ales and IPAs. It's sort of whatever you want to call it, but one sells better than the other. Stouts will generally probably sell better than porters, and IPAs definitely sell better than pale ales. So
I agree with that. Like, I don't know, maybe it's because outside of like a founder's porter, you don't really see that many porters out there.
No.
Unless it's more of like the maybe the smoked varieties, which are disgusting.
Atwater has like their vanilla Java porter.
Right.
I'm trying to think even locally here. Rupert's had theirs, right? For a while
they did.
Yep.
One of their popular beers. And then Gonzo's.
But again, that was a vanilla Java porter.
Yep.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Jason.
No, I go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I guess going back to that, or on the same subject of stouts versus porters. In my mind, I've always thought stouts are bigger, darker, heavier beers, which is kind of the classical definition, and then porters are a bit lighter, but they're all kind of in line. And the BJCP categories kind of support that, but it's such a minute difference. I mean, to your point, Jason, why?
I can understand some of the other categories, like pug stouts and Irish stout. My coffee stout's an Irish stout, and I get the characteristics of Irish that are different than a sweet stout.
Yep.
And I can understand that, but getting into that category 20, that American porter and stout, I really think it's kind of silly. And and the category is just American porter and stout.
Let's use that as an excuse to kind of to get into that. So, what is an Irish stout? Why is that different from what I'm drinking right now? This is it's one of my first attempts at a pastry stout. It's not really; it's just a big sweet stout. But
so, category 15B, Irish stout, is specifically a stout called out to have that darker roasted, I think more bitter forward stout. It's compared to, it's supposed to have coffee flavors, and it can actually be quite bitter, and that can be acceptable. I know that we all brew Irish stouts, and that's my biggest beer that I brew the most. So and what's funny is, I guess to compare what that coffee flavor is. So I actually brew a coffee beer. I put a half a gallon of cold brew coffee concentrate in that stout, and I enter it in the Irish stout category, and it gets complimented for having light coffee characteristics.
Sure.
So that's what's expected from an Irish stout. An Irish stout is supposed to be coffee and bitterness and darkness and none of this cream and sugar shit.
So that be Irish extra? What happens there?
Irish extra can range more into the bittersweet, the sweet round. I don't think the creaminess you're gonna get into the sweet stout category, or the milk stout, which is a completely separate category. But yeah, Irish extra is going to be, I believe, actually, let me pull it up. It's going to have a higher ABV. It's going to maybe have a little bit less attenuation, a little bit more lingering sweetness. Definitely sweeter and fuller on the palate than a more astringent, dry Irish stout.
But then American stouts are bitter too, though.
Yeah, I think you're. Oh, yeah.
I'm basically just trying to. I mean, you see where I'm going with this kind of too. Is that like
there's no
there?
differences. I know.
I mean, there are and there aren't. Yeah, it's I'm not a BJCP judge. I'm not classically trained in beer tasting or anything like that.
I would say, and
Um,
I'd have to double check because I'm not reading it verbatim, but I'd have to say that the American stout tends to be more of the malt bitter, maybe even charcoal bitter.
I think it's hop choice too, though, isn't it?
And it could be the hop choice too, but it's definitely a different bitter profile than the
Yeah.
Irish bitter.
Looking at it on the BJCP, it looks like American stouts are slightly higher in IBUs. Like Irish Extra goes up to 60, whereas American Stout goes up to 75. Again, like not. I guess that's a notable difference, but not massive. And everything else is pretty much in line. I mean, ABV is up to 7 for American Stout, and what was it? This document's really long. Irish Extra was 6.5. So yeah, it's kind of almost the difference between like an American Porter and American Stout. You know, you could almost submit a American Porter underneath an Irish Extra, and you'd have that, you know, those brackets tightened up just a little bit depending on what you brewed. But
I've actually entered my coffee stout in the same competition in 2 separate Irish Stout and I think American Stout, and it placed in the same. It placed in both categories in the same competition. There's so much overlap there.
Drew makes a good point too about yeast. Yeah, American stouts are typically brewed with like, you know, the Chico strain or whatever. And...
Sure, you're right. No yeast characteristics at all. Neutral. Yeah, boring.
I actually brewed an Irish Extra stout for my buddy Russ for his birthday last year, and I used Kaiser from Imperial for that, like a German ale yeast.
Yep.
And man, that thing was like clean, super clean. It just took like a good month for that like yeast to like flock out of suspension. But like I definitely could not see using that for like an American stout, but it worked really well for that. It was like super delicious. I still boil him for a bottle whenever I go over to his house.
I had a similar experience with Kaiser. I wound up trying to use that for a batch of looper, and it took months to settle and kind of clear up, and it was subpar. I actually think I threw that batch out.
I recently picked up a clear beer draft system, a couple of them, so I'm hoping that like for future batches for like those less flocculent yeasts, maybe I can get around having to wait so long. I'm looking forward to see how those go. And you mentioned like really high IBUs too a second ago. Isn't it like crazy like how you see like on IPAs and stuff like that, the IBUs like always advertised like it's a total advertisement thing, you know, in my opinion. And then like stouts often have like just as high like IBUs, but they have to balance out like all the malt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you guys familiar with the like it's like a BU to GU ratio? For like plain beers and stuff like that.
I haven't looked into it.
It's basically just like the gravity of your beer divided by like what the like theoretical like IBUs are.
So there was another brewing calculator online that did something like that. Wasn't it like Brew Toad or like they
RIP.
Yeah, it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, no, there was. I remember we were designing a brew for Keepers. I forget which one it was, and somebody brought that up, and they were like, "Boogoo, thank you,
Boogoo.
Brandon." Yes, like the somebody at the table was like, "Boogoo, don't you use Boogoo?" And I'm like, "What in the fuck is?"
Yeah, I've never even heard of this.
Boogoo, and a couple of quick searches for it, and then I decided, no, it's stupid. I'm sorry. You know,
generally, yeah, no, I if we weren't using software that like told us where like we needed to be, like already, like maybe it would be important.
Look, on a home brewer scale,
Yeah,
we really can't. We can't test for IBUs. You're taking the word of the hop grower on how much alpha and beta acids are in those hops and what you're going to get out of it, and you're trusting some brewing software that you're plugging in that number and it's going to do what it says it's going to do, and honestly it's all a gamble,
and it's theoretical at best.
Yeah, we can't test for it. I prefer to brew more to to taste and I guess experience than try to literally. I'm not trying to knock anybody, but we were sitting there designing this recipe and somebody mentioned a Bugu scale, and I when I Googled it, I was like, holy shit, we'd have to put in so much hops to get this balance, and it just didn't make sense. And we brewed the beer without that, and the beer came out fine. It's coming to me now. It was the Imperial Brown. Yeah.
And it is a little sweet, which it was supposed to be.
Right. It's an Imperial Brown. Yeah.
And I think the original idea was like even like an Imperial like sweet brown ale, wasn't it? Like I don't even know if like. So I mean, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, but I think if we would have followed the Bugu calculation, it would have called for, I want to say at the time, and I'd have to find my notebook, but it was like quadruple or quintuple the hops that we want to put.
Oh, that's significant.
That's huge.
It didn't make sense.
Interesting. So, okay.
Was it you, Brandon? Was it you that brought up Bugu at the table?
as the chat slows down. Yeah.
But that said, Irish Stout is probably the most common, I think, stout out there. I mean, being that it's Guinness and Beamish and Murphy's, and it's like the kind of the grandfather of the stouts, or what we know as stout in America. But there are several other varieties of stouts, and I don't really play too much outside of barrel aged, which is a whole other game. But oyster stouts and milk stouts and sweet stouts, and chocolate stouts, and
what was that first one that you said?
Oyster stout.
Yeah, no, never.
Is that a thing?
It is absolutely a thing.
Oh yeah.
I've had an oyster beer before. It was like an oyster pilsner, and it just tasted like licking the beach. But
so
is this like actually with oysters?
It is, I think. Yeah.
So there are two variations. I'll lay down some education.
Okay.
Oyster stouts. And I'm reading from a webpage here. Stouts in the 18th century, oysters were very commonplace food, often served in the pubs and taverns. Oyster beds, as we came into the 20th century, oyster beds were in decline, and stout had given way to pale ales. So there was a guy, his name was Ernest Barnes, came up with the idea of combining oysters with stout using an oyster concentrate.
Fuck you, Ernest.
Ernest Barnacle.
and it was invented in New Zealand, actually, with
Really?
Hamilton Brewery in London producing it for them in the UK. So that was actually brewed with oyster concentrate. Today, oyster stouts are brewed. There are some oyster stouts on the market. They are marked not suitable for vegetarians. They do have oyster concentrate in it.
I want to try one.
But many oyster stouts that you see on the market today are actually meant to be paired with oysters or have suitable flavors to kind of complement that salty.
No, Brandon.
Food.
Not the same thing.
Not the same thing.
So I think I don't have a good one that's produced right now.
Yeah, I can't think of one. I know there's like one probably from Maine that's super popular that has to exist, and I just can't put a name on it or anything. But if it had to be from anywhere, it'd probably be from there or something.
The only thing I remember from tasting the oyster beer, it's like it actually tasted gritty, like
salty,
something
like
weird about it. It wasn't. It was bad. I was just saying it wasn't bad, but it was bad. But I'll try a stout. This definitely wasn't a stout. I don't know where it came from. But
yeah, so like I said, now they're meant to be paired with oysters to complement that salty or saline food that
I do like oysters.
Yeah.
That's something we didn't talk about last week. is pairing with food.
Yeah, maybe we can save that for like another.
Well, I don't. Yeah, we definitely can. But what do you like to drink your stouts with, as far as like food goes?
More stout.
Stout and more stout. That's just. It's all you need for dinner, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, like that.
You drink enough beer, you get your caloric intake, and
I mean, yeah, some of those bigger ones can be like what 800 calories.
The Beersmith estimated this beer as being something like 400 calories per 12 ounces.
It's only for the Imperials.
Yeah.
It really is. It's higher alcohol, more calories. But I think I actually mentioned this last week. It is truth, and you can Google it and find out and do your research, that a typical normal ABV ounce for ounce. Well, here's the tricky thing. If you compare a 5% stout to a 5% IPA, they probably got similar calories because of the alcohol. But darker malts do not give off as much or any fermentable sugars. So typically, you can have if you had the same size grain bill for an IPA versus a stout, you're going to have a lower alcohol beer and a lower caloric beer, just because
but
you're not getting as much
sugar. Will still kind of
sugar. Alcohol, it's all sugar of some sort.
So sugar, gosh, I can't remember my nutrition classes. It's like 7 calories per something of sugar versus, I want to say, like 3 for alcohol, or maybe it's 7 for alcohol and 9 for sugar. I can't remember. Alcohol is a little bit less calories per measurement than something like sugar does. But to Jason's point, though, those big stouts that have all the unfermentable sugars in them, you're still drinking that.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just not alcohol.
If you're comparing a Two-Hearted Light or whatever it's called to, a Dark Lord, of course there's going to be 1,000 calories in that glass of shit. So here comes a Guinness. Proper pour.
Man, I haven't had a Guinness in a long time. I don't think I've had a Guinness since I came back from Ireland. I don't.
St. Patrick's Day is usually the only time I drink Guinness. It's not because I don't enjoy it. I do. It's just because, honestly, I don't find myself buying a ton of any beer.
And there's I'd say out of the macro-ish produced beers, or the more mainstream beers, Guinness is probably the one that I drink the most. In fact, now that I'm building out my home bar, I'm actually planning on a Guinness tap. Typically it's my go-to beer. So
when you get a keg of Guinness, how does that work? Like, do you have to? Do they give you just the beer and you have to like add the beer gas yourself, or do they do something special?
No,
like
you
cans, or how does that work?
You get it's a Sankey keg that you have to serve with nitrogen, just like or beer gas, just like you would any other.
So you can pour it just on CO2.
I guess you could. It would come out flat, because I think it's so when you're doing a homebrew, when you're homebrewing for a nitro tap, you want to carbonate your beer very, very low. McQuillan's actually really good with this. It's something like what's a normal IPA is going to be carbonated to like 2.2 to 2.4 vols of CO2. And I think you want, if you're going to do like, we put coffee stout on nitro last year at Homebrew Fest. And I think we carbonated the base keg to 0.5 or 0.75 vols. So you're like a quarter or a third of the volume of CO2 is what it's carved at. And then you push with nitro. Nitro doesn't really dissolve into the beer like CO2. It's more of the injected. That's why you have a special tap for it. So the same with Guinness. If I bought that Sankey keg of Guinness and threw it on CO2, it's just going to be flat Guinness. Unless I carved it.
Maybe you should.
I'm going to have it on nitro.
It's going to be proper or nothing.
So you get that beautiful, thick, creamy. Let me get Arclight out of there.
Sorry. Is that a...
It's not a proper glass, but it's the glass that I had.
Is that a proper pour even? Is there enough head on there? Is there too much? Isn't there like a certain measurement of how much like foam you're supposed to have on top?
There is, and I have no idea.
Did you pour your own, Jordan, when you were over there?
I did. I am a certified Guinness pourer.
Did you do it? Did they like?
Did
you did you do it right? That were they like, oh yeah, good job? Like,
no,
or did they tell anybody like you fucked up? Let me do this for you.
No,
like,
I can tell you, I honestly fucked up. Like
I think I hear everybody does.
Fucked mine up. Right? The Andrea, however, she did it like a fucking pro. Like I don't get it, but it was like she probably could have done some artwork in the top. Like
there was a story, and I don't know who told it to me, or I'm going to attribute it to John Sutton, but I think he was like at a pub, and this could just be a joke too. Somebody told me, I don't remember. But there was, American came up and ordered like 4 Guinnesses, and the bartender, did the 2/3 pour and set the glass down on all 4, and then turned around to like, pull a different beer for somebody else. And when he turned back, the 4 glasses were gone. And the American, they had taken the glasses and left, and he laughed because, he was like, they just left with 2/3 of their beer. But if the stupid American wants to take a 2/3 beer and pay for a full pour, then so be it.
It's a learning thing, right? I mean, you don't know what you don't know. I get it.
I wasn't used to like the 2-way, and maybe this is all nitro. I don't own a nitro tap, but yeah, the dual tap. So when I'm used to like closing mine because like I don't want any beer leaking out. So when I shoved it back, it kept pouring. I was like, stop.
Yeah. Yeah, McQuillan went over it at Homebrew. We've for 2 years now, we've had nitro taps or his nitro tap at the Homebrew, and you got to do like, you feather it and then, you want to open it to do a full pour, and it's fun. And that's a whole nother episode on nitro beers. What should and shouldn't be put on nitro.
There we go. We're just coming up
everything
with
but stout.
Right. Yeah.
If it's not stout, don't fucking put it on nitro.
When I was in Colorado, like everything was on nitro.
Dude, it was a big thing for a while. Yeah. Everybody wanted to try everything on nitro.
Like, it was.
Sam Adams was like canning some of their IPAs, like on nitro and stuff, and they were awful. It just tasted like flat IPA.
I had what is it? It was a beer. It's a Scotch ale from Oscar Blues, Old Chub. While I was out there, and I was like, I feel like that would be pretty good, like a creamy Scotch ale. I did not like it. Maybe it was something wrong with that place where I had it, but it was just.
That's like I was at Founders, and they were putting, I think it was a Zaka on nitro.
Oh,
and it was just like, yeah, it was terrible. Nothing against Founders. It's just. It shouldn't be on nitro, and now flip side, Rubeus on nitro.
Oh, that's true. That's so good.
That is heavenly.
Now, what would you guys think about milkshake IPAs on nitro?
No.
No.
I'm not feeling even the creamsicle IPA. I don't think I would dig. I like the bubbles in that.
Creamy.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. No, Jason really likes this naughty sauce.
Naughty sauce, my all-time favorite beer,
which is like a white stout, right? Or like a coffee blonde or something.
Coffee Java milk stout on nitro, served by Noble Ale Works in California. I'm sorry, Michigan, but I before COVID, I was in California a week a month, and Noble Ale Works was a mile away from my hotel, and they're really great people, and they really do awesome beer. And the Naughty Sauce is like their gold medal, big award-winning flagship beer, and it is super special.
California? I mean, just out of curiosity, I'm supposed to be there like a year and a half or so.
Yeah, so it's in Anaheim. Okay. It's actually it's Noble Ale Works is within walking distance to Angel Stadium and the Honda Center for the Ducks games. So you'll actually, I go there. And if there's I usually check if there's a baseball game, because usually the people from Angel Stadium will fill up the brewery until the game starts, and then they'll walk over. And then you go, because all of those annoying baseball people are out of there. Nitro Sour. I did have one.
Really? I have not.
I haven't. Oh, that's interesting.
I did have one, and it was actually, I think, at Noble, and it was not good.
I don't think that sounds good.
I could see like the have you guys had my boysenberry yet, or just like
yes, well, I just had it the other day.
Oh yeah. So I think like those new sort of like milkshake or smoothie style sours on nitro may not be the worst.
No,
Because I don't know, fruit. I feel like maybe that makes the whole difference sometimes.
I was just gonna say that I think
lambic. I could see
yeah.
being on.
Yeah,
And that's what I was going to
That'd
say.
be
Like,
worth
I would
trying.
back off my stout statement and say like stout and fruit beers because Rubaeus
Oh
is
yeah, fruit beer.
amazing.
Oh, there you go.
know?
Yeah.
So if it was a fruited sour, that might be interesting. And the one that comes to mind that I had was a wild, like a farmhouse sour or a wild sour, and it was not. It just tasted funky.
Yeah, I could see that
Like
being
creamy
weird.
Yeah.
socks. Yeah.
That's for dinner.
Or creamy aged. I think it was creamy aged meat.
Oof.
But no, fruit beers. Fruit beers. You have to have something to hold up the nitro, right? The nitro is so neutral and so soft, and I think something's got to be there. You got to have the flavor there.
I'm with you. Patrick said that to a good point. Nitro kills hop character, which I totally agree. You need those bubbles there to carry that aroma out of the glass and stuff.
Yep, I would agree with that.
I just cracked open a. Oh, go ahead.
I would say I've never had a nitro IPA, so I've never been able to compare them back to back. But I could definitely agree with that statement.
I think you can still find Guinness's nitro IPA. Like Mega Bev. I mean, like buy one if you can. But,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Sam.
I forgot they did that.
Sam Adams was it was sad.
Sad Adams.
Sad
It
Adams.
was sad.
It was sad. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I cracked one and gave the other 3 away. I just cracked my other homebrew. I only have 2 homebrew stouts that I have sitting downstairs, like aging or whatever. But I tended not to change the subject real quick, but for my stouts, I tend to like probably drink maybe like half the keg, and then I get to be at the point where like I don't want this on tap anymore, but I still want to drink this later, and I just bottle off the rest and like stick it away somewhere. Like, do you guys usually finish off all your stout or?
Oh,
no,
dude, yeah. Go ahead, Jordan.
No, I was say no. Past few I haven't. Just as I feel like stouts. No, granted, my stouts will usually sit in the kegerator for 4 to 6 months.
It's good aging, honestly.
Yeah, well, cold aging. I usually let them sit for 2 to 3 generally, with very limited serving before I start drinking on them.
Yeah.
But that's just me. And yeah, I mean, I've got this isn't pug stout, but I got my pug stout and my mega pug in boxes down here because I couldn't turn them into any competitions this year. So not to poke that wound.
Yeah, it still hurts so bad.
But yeah, no, I generally don't. I mean, unless I don't have bottles available. But thanks to you, Brian, I have plenty now.
You're welcome. Yeah, I got those.
Thank
those
you.
cheap. Yeah, Drew's asking about tropical stouts, and I can only think of one example I've had in even the last 2 or 3 years because nobody brews them, and it was at One Well in town here. And for the life of me, I can't remember what the beer was called. I want to say it had some like sort of Jamaican or Rastafarian like name or something like that. But it was good. I feel like it sort of had like a almost like a so they use CTZ, or they used to at the time, for a lot of their bittering hops. So those are all like really similar taste. It's what, like Zeus, Columbus, and what's the T? Is the C Columbus? I'm such a bad brewer right now.
God, Brian, get with your shit. I can't.
Somebody in chat help me out. Zeus, Tomahawk, and what's the C? Is it Columbus? It's.
I know, I'm looking it up on the BJCP thing just
Okay.
to see how far it actually varies from all of our other stout categories.
But in any case, like and like any brewery, sort of, I think like your house flavor like changes over time. But at that time, One Well's house flavor was very dank and like resinous and like weedy. And they used Zeus for all of their bittering hops, and that stout had a super dank, like marijuana sort of like taste to it. That was like delicious, and it like really blended well with like whatever like malts um, they chose to use for that. But what are like the style guidelines on a tropical stout when you guys look that up?
Yeah, I'm on it right now. So like, the style comparison says like tastes like a scaled up sweet stout with higher fruitiness, similar to some imperial stouts without the high bitterness, strong burnt roastiness, late hops, and with lower alcohol. Much more sweet and less hoppy than American stouts. Much sweeter and less bitter than the similar gravity export stouts. So yeah, our IBUs are 30 to
So, but it's still not like super helpful, right? It's like
no.
if you're sitting blind, like, and you get a stout put in front of you, and it's like, oh fuck, is this American, Irish, tropical? Like,
Well, yeah, and I feel like
without being told, it's probably hard to say. It's at the brewer's discretion a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes you can really tell, but
yeah, I'm reading through like the aroma here because I feel like that's one thing that we're kind of hitting on, especially with like tropical stouts. Like I feel like that's like the aroma and maybe the flavor really needs to be in sync there to differentiate it. But even then, I'm not really seeing
Yeah.
popping out.
So the history of it really started out as a foreign export stout, or the British stouts that were being reproduced in the West Indies and Africa, and they because of shipping back then, they were forced to use local adjuncts. So you're going to have beers made with sorghum and beers made with indigenous grains. They didn't have barley; they had corn, sorghum, wheat. And so they had different sugars going into them and slightly different flavors that gave them that that kind of tropical sweetness. The tropical that people think today is like, well, I'm going to throw coconut shit in there.
Yeah,
and that's not at all what.
Yeah.
It was just made with different sugar bases than our traditional foreign extra stout.
It says that in the history of the, and I just realized that there's a history note portion in these BJCP things.
Yeah, you got to memorize those too for those tests. They sometimes the written portion of those tests.
So it does. I think I read about it. Talked about them using different. Again, kind of going back to I think what Drew said earlier is it's different yeasts. The yeast that they had in the Caribbean kind of tended to lend to more fruity esters. That may be where some people get some of those coconutty flavors. I know Brian, you tried to brew a beer that didn't have coconut, but you're going with those coconut flavors from hops, right? Sabro.
Sabro. Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely different yeasts out there that will give you that different fruit estery characteristics. And so it was just more of traditionally a beer brewed in those hotter climates in the Caribbean and Africa, that kind of came with adjunct sugars and different sweetnesses, or different yeast flavors, I should say, yeast characteristics.
So how about brewing these styles? So one thing that I haven't tried yet, and I don't know if you have, Jordan, but I know Jason, or I'm sorry, I know that I don't know about you, Jason, but I know that Jordan has lately, is a cold steeping dark grains. It's not something that I do, but I know that Jordan's done that. So
yeah, maybe
we can talk about like cold steeping grains and stuff like that, and what that's supposed to accomplish. So what have you been doing that lately, Jordan, or a couple of beers that you've made maybe recently?
Brian, I'm gonna agree with you. I don't know if I have done that.
Really?
Did I talk about that? I've done a lot of what do you call it, decoction mashing recently.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
So
Yeah.
in the club, the big cold steeper is actually McQuillan and Patrick and Genzer.
Yeah,
Really?
I don't think I've done cold steeping.
Yeah. I mean, the intent behind cold steeping is to impart the color and flavor without bitterness. When you cold steep, the heat breaks down the grain or the coffee or whatever you're doing and puts off more of those bitter tannins. And so cold steeping will let you get a darker beer with some of the complex malty characteristics without as much of the malt bitterness, the charcoal, the burnt. But yeah, actually it was, and I think Patrick's listening. So it was McQuillan, Patrick, and Pregenzer all went together. They brewed a beer together, and I think they did different yeasts. And they've done this a couple of times, and they cold steeped, I think, all the dark malts because, not maybe because, but I know Patrick's an extract brewer, and he used the cold steeping. I don't know. Patrick can yell at me if I'm wrong, but anyway, they all won a medal because of it. They produced a great beer. Cold steeping the malts. Yeah, there's Patrick. Thank you.
Yep.
Oops. So that was their medal last year at Homebrew Fest. Was for their cold steep stout, and they did that to avoid some of the extra bitterness.
See, I'd be interested to, maybe I'll try that, because I usually, with my pug stout or basically any of my stouts, almost all the grains that I use are dehusked, so they're supposed to be less bitter, if you will.
Here's a good one. Patrick says they feel it shortens the stout aging time, which I get that. So
yeah, I totally get that.
The aging time of the stout can kind of mellow it out, and you're doing that. You're not putting the tannins in there from hot, the hot break on that grain, and it's going to take a lot less time to get to a more pleasant, palatable finish. So it's a good point. When I do my coffee stout, I cold steep the coffee, and I do it for that reason, because coffee can really put off a bitter, those extra bitter tannins that comes from like a brewed cup of coffee is good if you like dark black coffee, and you get that hot cup of coffee and it's bitter and it's amazing. But on a beer that sits, you don't want that. You just want the coffee flavor, the mellowness of it. And I'm going way out on a limb here, but I know that if you age a beer with coffee, you have you run the risk of the beer converting the coffee to, or the conversion that happens to the coffee in the bottle changing to a pepper flavor.
Yeah, and I've tasted some of that.
Yeah,
it's true. It totally does.
It does. Yeah. It does. I've had
just
some
like green pepper. Yeah,
it totally takes on a pepper characteristic. I've got 3 years of coffee stout of Colombian grind that I've brewed, and when I do go back and drink them, I don't get that. And and again, this is just my opinion, conjecture, whatever. I wonder if it's because I'm cold steeping, and I'm not picking up those tannins, or I'm not picking up those chemicals that change into that pepper characteristic. So,
are you talking about using like a toddy, like a cold brew system?
That's exactly what I use.
Oh, okay.
I have a toddy.
Yeah, I use that too. Yeah, I like my toddy.
I have a toddy cold brew system, so I do 1 pound of coarse grained Colombian coffee in however much water I can fit in there, and it usually comes out to about 2 quarts is the finished product that I get.
Yep.
And that goes into right into my beer at flame out.
Sounds like Drew uses a toddy too.
Yeah, toddy's amazing.
And well, obviously he does. So Drew used the toddy. He's the one that told me about it, and that's why I have mine. So yeah.
Last year for Homebrew Fest, we put a keg of cold brew coffee on tap.
How was that made, by the way? There was a lot of coffee. Like, how do you make them cold brew?
So I made that over the course of like 6 days with my toddy, 1 pound at a time.
No way.
Wow.
And so I went to Meyer. It wasn't good coffee. It was
Folgers. Well, you have to use whole beer, or you have to use coarse ground, right?
You have to use coarse ground. So no, it was like Meyer brand coffee.
Okay.
And McQuillan I think it was McQuillan had the great idea to put a nitro coffee on tap.
And
Which,
it was a fantastic idea.
But the kicker here is that beer gas contains CO2, and CO2 makes coffee taste like ass.
Mm-hmm.
So we did run that risk. But yeah, I took, I think, 6 pounds of coffee in my toddy over the course of it, and I dumped that in I just put that in the keg, and I think I doubled the water.
Okay.
So it wound up being, like 12 quarts of coffee and 12 quarts of water in that keg. I don't know the math there if that's actually more than the volume of the keg or not, but whatever.
It worked. We were
dude, there were
in the morning.
I know there were clubs. There
were people like wandering around aimlessly before we would wake up in the morning, and they'd see some of our club members like walk into
Right.
start setting stuff up. And
we put that cold brew coffee on nitro, and they were like crying at our bar. Like, it was great. Funny story about that is I have most of the kegs from homebrew, and I went to clean a keg last week.
Oh, no.
And I wanted a keg to put my IPA in, and I dug in the back of my garage, which is full of shit because I've got some construction going on, and I found a keg, and it had a tag on it and said coffee, and I'm like, oh cool. I grabbed it, and it was like a third full of coffee that I brewed in August of 2019, and it's July of 2020.
How'd it look?
It blinked at me.
Did you kill it? You sentient?
I tore apart the keg, and I boiled it, and I replaced all the rubber, and it's good to go. But yeah, the leftover cold brew coffee from last year just got dumped out. That's how
Nice. So
that's how shitty my garage is right now.
Drew just has like ever done whole beans in secondary, assumed to be like that's the only way I've ever used coffee in a beer, and I've made a coffee blonde once.
That's how I make all my coffee blondes.
Yeah.
If you don't want the color, if you're doing that coffee blonde or that white stout, you definitely want to do whole bean in the secondary to get the flavor without the color.
I find about 2 ounces of like the freshest roasted beans that you can find, like anything local, for 5 gallons works pretty well.
So what would be, the difference between, say, like a white stout and a coffee blonde?
Cacao.
Just okay.
I mean, in my opinion, it's cacao.
Maybe a little lactose.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, probably a little bit of sweetness, but definitely chocolate.
In fact, between a white stout and a coffee blonde.
Yeah.
Definitely the sweetness and the chocolate. Yeah.
Oh.
Have you had the Founders Marvel roast yet?
No, I have not. Dude, I don't get out of my house. I go to work. I have a 8 weeks old, 2 months old today, actually. Yeah,
hey, happy
birthday, Charlie.
Yeah. I don't get out too much. So
I think I have a few bottles sitting around. I'll save one for you. I'll run it over next time I see you.
Brian brought one over last week, and Marvel Roast is the closest. Well, probably the second closest Michigan beer that I've had to Naughty Sauce. If it was on nitro, I think it would be right there. It's that sweet, chocolatey coffee.
It's like full body too. Like
it is super full body.
A thick blonde beer. Yeah.
ArcLight does Swayze Crazy, which is very, very close and very good, and I think it's very close to Marvel Roast. So if you get down to ArcLight or Tiger Brew, or why did I say Tiger Brew? They're both on the Tiger Brew tail. Founders and ArcLight are both Tiger Brew. ArcLight with the Swayze Crazy, or Founders with Marvel Roast. They're fantastic white stouts.
What's your preferred glass to drink stout out of? I just watched myself take a sip on camera with my little, not quite tulip glass, but do you have favorite glasses? Do you guys, are you the kind of people that even do that, or are you just like pint glass and whatever?
I mean, Jordan's drinking out of a horn.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, if I can, I got a series of tulip glasses, and I'll drink out of those generally. But I don't try to. I don't go out of my way to pair a beer with the right type of glass.
So I use Libby tulip glasses for like 90%
That's
of
what
the
I
beers
have.
that I drink. They're the best. Seriously, like they go with everything.
I'll agree with David Jones.
A
Full one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a glass snob, although I'm in the middle of setting up my bar, and I was just telling Amy last night, like we need, I've got highballs and pints, and we need coupes and martinis, and I need tulips, and I need Pilsner
Pilsners.
glasses, and
Yeah.
so, but I'm not a glass snob.
I've got tulips. I've got pints. I've got some. What do you call the Oktoberfest style ones? I've got like 4 of those.
Boots.
They're like a liter.
Just the Stein thing.
Yeah, they big glass bastard that I only drank out of a few times because it's way too much beer at
I
one
used to have a
time.
metal one. Last year at the Michigan State Fair homebrew competition, winners won ceramic steins, and I drank my beer out of that for a while.
Yeah,
It's like almost too much.
Too.
Yeah. I will say though, I'm not a glass snob when it comes to beer. I don't give a shit. It's a full one is all that really matters. But with my whiskey, I do prefer a Glencairn. So
What is that?
the Glencairn glass.
Look it up and then share. Okay. So I'm gonna throw this out there. In the meantime, let's see if I can.
Haze for president.
Oh, dude, can I? Will let me zoom in on this? Oh man.
This
So
is your glass.
I got this today.
It's cutting off Bernie's head. There you go.
Actually, I don't know where it went. My daughter must have picked it up and put it in the.
Where the hell did you find this?
So some guy on Reddit made it as a shit post months ago, and then people are like, "Oh my god, if you put that on a glass, I would totally buy that." And of course, I'm one of those guys that's it's kind of fucking funny.
I was gonna say, weren't you trying to do a glass purge?
And I did. I dropped off literally 3 Bell's beer box cases of glasses to Goodwill last week, and
time to
and here I am getting new glasses in the mail. So I set up a shelf downstairs, and I'm moving most of my pint glasses and stuff down there to share with people, and I'm keeping my nice glasses upstairs, and I'm trying to justify it, and it's not working, but it's okay. Did you find one?
So back to stouts. No, I have no idea.
No.
I don't know how to do the fancy screen share yet. But back to stouts. We've talked about now oyster, Irish, tropical, American, and porter. We can skip chocolate because it's boring. Use chocolate. Imperial stouts, milk stouts. I think are the last ones that are the big ones that we haven't really hit on. Milk stout, of course, being the addition of
2%.
I was going to say half and half, but
oh no.
Well, when I was just getting into beer and I had a left-hand milk stout for the first time, there was a discussion going around the table of what a milk stout was, and this is back before we were smart enough to just go to Google and just be milk stout.
So,
but there weren't even a lot of homebrewers around there at the time. But so it's obviously with the addition of lactose. But we all thought milk, really, at the time. And we were trying to figure out how the beer wasn't spoiling and shit. And I was kind of adverse to even trying milk stouts for a while because I thought that literally they were gonna go bad. So lesson learned on that. Have you guys ever made a milk stout?
Yeah. I basically just took my coffee stout and put lactose in it instead of coffee.
I suppose, I've brewed the pug stout for 10 years. I've used lactose at some point.
Yeah. It was okay. I have a case of it in the basement that I use a bottle almost every time I make chili.
Oh, I've done that with my chilies too. I've used some of my stouts for that. It's wonderful.
Do you have to boil it for a little longer, or how's that work? Like, how do you use it in a chili?
Usually I brown my meat and seasonings. Then when I put in the tomatoes and beans and things, I pour a bottle of stout in and then let it simmer as long as I can. I mean,
Okay.
as soon as it's hot, it's good, but if
Yep.
you can let it simmer all day, it's better. And if you eat it tomorrow, it's amazing.
It's exactly what we do. I don't know if you make yours in a pot. We usually do ours in a crock pot because
It
just
depends.
time.
If I have time, yeah.
Yep.
I still have it, Drew. Once you open your brewery, I'll make sure it finds its way over there. That'll be my my house glass or
Awesome.
something.
So milk stouts are going to give us that sweeter, fuller characteristic. Historically they were. This goes back in time, right? They were brewing it to put more nutrients in beer. This was back in the day when you were expected on lunch or your break from loading the ships at the dock to go drink a couple of pints, and that's where you got your
I didn't
caloric
actually realize this was
from.
a historical style like that. I kind of thought it was something newer.
No, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
In fact, back in the early 1900s, let me pull it up. So during the World Wars, the British government required brewers to remove the word milk from labels because it was associating the beer with milk, which was being rationed.
Huh.
So it's not a newer style. It's I don't have the date for when it was done, but it was. They used to actually advertise it. Here Maxon's used to advertise. Each pint contains energizing carbohydrates.
That's amazing.
So this is, back in the day. If you go back into England and Britain, there's Drew.
You muted yourself, Jason. I think. Jason, you're muted.
No. I think he said he might be having internet issues. Maybe I am.
No, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He's been stuttering for a little bit. I thought it was just me.
So I've been on this call I've been on this headset for 12 hours today, so it's probably dying out on me. So I apologize. But no, it's just back in the day in history, beer was food. Beer saved the world. Yeah, How Beer Saved the World. Watch that movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
I've not seen it. Okay, I'll have to do that. It's on my list.
Yeah.
It's pretty much been at the cornerstone of most of our advancements.
Is that on Netflix or anything?
I think it was.
It was at one time. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to switch to a wired shitty connection because I'm losing you. So bear with me for a second.
Nah, you're fine.
Amongst yourself.
The only time I use lactose in my stouts lately has been in imperial stouts, honestly. So maybe we can use that as a transition into something like pastry stouts and imperial stouts and stuff like that. But I don't find myself making them too often, but mostly because I like having beer to drink, and I don't usually keep a whole lot of stuff to bottle and age and stuff like that. And to Patrick's point, a while ago, some stouts do take a little while to age and to just kind of their own. But yeah, have you guys made any imperial stouts lately or anything, or is that something you do for competitions or?
Yeah, I guess. Well, RAS. I don't know if my Mega Pug would be considered an RAS or just an Imperial. I'd have to take a look at the. I don't know if I quite hit the bitterness levels correct for an RAS.
So BJCP, there is not really an RAS specifically. It's just Imperial Stout.
Oh, okay.
So well, you probably hit. It's honestly, it's probably one of the most wide-ranging categories that there is, simply because of RASs are really bitter, usually.
Yeah,
but
and I know you and I brewed those the same day, and I tried yours.
Oh yeah, yeah,
that's really better, and mine was not.
Mm-hmm.
So, pardon me.
Oh,
But,
Jason,
but
your mic's not working.
he's still kind of choppy on my end. I don't know about you looking at his video. Maybe it's me.
You, man.
I don't know. But yeah. I mean, the Mega Pug was that was the first time I brewed it. And it was essentially just kind of like a stepped up version of my, my Pug Stout.
How about now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
So what I was trying to say was with Imperial Stout, I think in the description of Imperial, I can't count how many times it says the word intense. Intensely flavored, intense flavors, intense character. So an Imperial Stout or a Russian Imperial Stout is just everything, but plus some more.
Yep.
More alcohol, more bitterness, more sweetness, more flavor, more roastiness.
There was a. You guys ever listen to the Experimental Brewing podcast?
Nah, not really.
Maybe once.
So occasionally they do like these smaller, like maybe like half-hour episodes. I can't remember what they call them, but they had one guy on once that that sort of like went over his award-winning like Russian Imperial Stout, his Russian Imperial Stout recipe, and he swears that even like a little bit of diacetyl in the beer like just helps bring out more complexity. So I mean, not only are you having like malts and hops and the oxidation and stuff like that from aging and stuff like that, but even like a little bit of diacetyl and like bottle carbine and stuff like that adds to it. Like there's so much flavor, I guess, packed into like imperial beers that a little bit of like oxygen or off flavor can actually add complexity to the beer. And that's something that can be said to like even some lagers and stuff like that too, right? Like it's not always like unwarranted, which I thought was interesting, because I'm always like super hyper focused on no oxygen, no off flavors and stuff.
But if you think about it, like stouts, especially the imperial stouts lend themselves to barrel aging, and barrel aging is doing that. It's introducing
that's a great
oxygen,
point.
and it's introducing, some of them off flavors, but in controlled amounts or in subtle amounts to add those complexities. And, and yeah, I think that's actually one of the only things besides sours that should be barrel aged. Same with nitros, like we go back to that, people out there, you don't have to put everything in a fucking barrel. But a big old imperial stout, absolutely, put it in a barrel, see what it does.
Big barley wine?
I have no use for barley wines in general.
I hate there's the whole crew of people out there that are hashtag BIL, like the barley wine is life, movement and stuff like that. But I
have not heard of this.
I think it was like I don't know. It was like it might have even been just like a meme thing, like years ago. But I'm kind of with you.
I've never intentionally brewed one. I've accidentally brewed a couple, but it's not my style.
They're tough to drink sometimes. You got to be in a special mood, I guess. They're not a summer beer. And
people keep putting them in big ass bottles, and
and then you have to share them, right? And it's like, none of us have any friends, so like, what are we gonna do with like big old bombers of beer?
21st Amendment, I believe it was 21st Amendment. When I was in California, they're a California brewery. They distribute here, but they do a barley wine, and they were the first one that I've ever seen. I have some somewhere because I'll never open them, but they sell them in 6-ounce cans, little cans, and I'm like, that's as much barley wine as I can take. So I bought a like a 4-pack of them or whatever, and it's still a shitty barley wine, but
if the price is right, like it seems all right to me. I've had some decent barley wines, like but yeah, it's not something that I go out of my way to find. I think usually
if I'm percentage on, I'll drink it.
I'll drink almost anything you put in front of me except smoke shit, unless we're at a homebrew meeting and David Jones makes me to try another damn smoked beer. which I'll do, but it's gross.
Topic for another show, but I do have a rye wine brewing right now.
I've had your red wine before. It's
but,
good.
But we'll get on. We can
Yeah.
talk about that later. It's off topic.
Right.
Shayna brought up to me today. She goes, "So you're having a stout episode. Are you actually going to talk about stouts after the IPA?"
Here we are talking about rye wines and barley wines.
So no, probably not. I guess. Sorry.
Welcome to Michigan Brews, where every episode is a grab bag.
Well, I think we did okay.
No,
Yeah.
we did. I think it was a good discussion on stouts, and actually, one thing I want to talk about, for the keepers out there, and then hopefully some other homebrew clubs that are may watch this or are going to start watching these, is I was surprised at keepers at how many people have never brewed a stout. And in talking to these home brewers and brewers that have brewed for years or whatever, and they find that stouts are, difficult, or they're somehow concerned or afraid to brew a stout, or they're intimidated by a stout. And I always wondered, like, why? Like, it's literally throwing half a pound of black patent on whatever you're brewing and seeing what the hell comes out. Like, they're not hard to do. And stouts, black IPAs, Cascadian dark ales, whatever the hell you want to call it. There's so much more flavor. If you're a coffee drinker, definitely brew a stout. Check it out.
I think that you're absolutely right. It's probably the most forgiving of the styles that you can brew, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to worry about like your IPA flavor falling off. There's so much roast that like the all flavors can sort of be covered up a little bit.
I will say that you can. It's not saying this is from experience, but you can add too much roasted.
What does that taste like?
You ever licked charcoal?
I have not, but okay.
Yeah. It's not that bad, to be honest. I feel like I added the pug stout I was drinking earlier. I feel like I went a little overboard on the roasted malts, but I was just looking at my recipe, and yeah, it looks like Jason said, half a pound. I think I've got close to what, 2.5 pounds maybe
of black patent.
No, black patent. They only had 8 ounces, so yeah, that was half a pound of black patent. But I mean, in terms of like your other roasted malts, like chocolate, roasted barley.
Oh no, yeah, you can do some more.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've talked about this before in like my brewing for competition presentation, but with coffee stout, I brewed that so many times, and it started out to be such a shitty beer. I was scoring like 18s, 19s, and the feedback that I got on it in the beginning was, too much malt bitterness and too much astringency and too much charcoal and things like that, and you start, reducing the black patent, or actually it was David Jones that really helped me with the breakthrough there, was switching from black patent to Carafa 3, which was Carafa's a dehusk, so it's naturally less bitter.
Is it Black Prince?
Actually, there was a step there. I changed black patent to Black Prince, which is also a dehusked.
I think that's what I've generally used.
I think they call it debittered.
Yes,
They call it debittered. But then Carafa 3 it's actually a dehusked
special.
Yeah.
Carafa 3 special. There's husked and unhusked Carafas.
Yeah, I know. I learned that lesson the hard way.
So you do have to be careful, unless you really do like that charcoaly flavor, then more power to you. But yeah, your darker malt should definitely contains a gradient, maybe a little 120 for some sweetness and color, maybe a little chocolate for some balance and color. Pale chocolate is a good step. You can do more if you want to up the ABV. You can use pale chocolate. It's got a little bit more, fermentable sugars in it without lending so much of the bitterness.
Pale chocolate, I think, lends a ton of chocolate flavor.
And it does, yeah, absolutely.
That and Carafa 2, I think, are the most like chocolatey flavored malts, in my opinion.
Interesting. All right.
So yeah, as far as your recipe design goes, you definitely want to watch out. Don't go with. So you can watch in the SRMs. Black Prince, Black Pratt, and Carafa 3 are all in the 500 to 550 range. Don't go too heavy there. You want to build up. Start with building your palate up from that 150 200 range. With those 120s, Special B, some of those other darker malts to add some of that complexness if you want it, raisins or nuts or whatever. But that's again another. I'm actually working on a recipe presentation on recipe design, so that's another
Nice.
conversation. So
yeah, that'd be cool.
And yes, Matt, if you're coming in, Matt McClellan's joining us in chat. I think he's coming in late. We already talked about you and your wonderful cold steeping techniques. You beautiful bastard.
So do you guys have any tips and tricks or anything for like brewing a stout? Like one thing special that you do when you make a stout that you think really helps? Like it could be like an ingredient or like a hop or something like that. Or just something that like does something different.
I usually I do this with a lot of my beers though, honey malt at varying degrees.
I've never used honey malt in a stout.
I feel like honey malt, the burnt flavors actually play really well.
Interesting. Do you use that in pug stout?
Yes.
Okay. Huh.
That's a great addition.
Yeah. I honestly, I use it for probably 90% of the beers, unless it's like out of style to like my Heffies. I won't use it there, but I'll throw it in my IPAs and stouts, and if it's classic to style, and that's the big thing. Like I try as much as I can to try to brew to style, so that way I can get that experience. But yeah, if it allows me to, then yeah, I'm throwing a little bit in there.
That's cool. I never thought about that.
Yeah, and I've already done it or said it. It's switching to those dehusked carafas. I think was what really upped my stout game, getting me that darkest color possible with. I mean, we all like bitter beers, but you don't want it to be too aggressively bitter.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, again, this goes back to a text exchange I had with David Jones once, where he's texting me pictures from a brewery in Grand Rapids, I think, where you could see through the stouts, and he was kind of offended, and I don't blame him. And then I'm looking at my stouts, and I want that dark color. Somebody said it earlier in chat, the stout that looks back at you.
Yep.
And so to get that dark, to get that dark color, that deep dark, beautiful body, that without going overboard on the ashtray, or charcoal briquette, then definitely look to the Black Prince Carafa 3 Special, the dehusked. Another good one is Midnight Wheat.
I don't know if I've ever used that either.
I don't know if I've ever used that.
I don't think Ed's listening, but I think Arclight told me once that I think he told me once that he uses Midnight Wheat for all of his dark beers for his stouts. I believe. I could be wrong, but he's got some great bourbon barrel aged, like
yeah, he does.
Stout,
yeah, he really does.
And Black Mirror and stuff like that. Yeah, David Jones. It was. He sent me a picture of it. You could see through it. Yeah.
Which technically, if you shine a light through a Guinness, it's strong enough. It's a very deep ruby color. It is actually clear, but it's dark enough where like it takes a really strong light to actually see that. It's not like you can just hold it up to like the ceiling and be like, The
day that he was sending me those, I went like I went on into my beer room, and I was pouring samples of my stout and holding my phone up to it and sending pictures back, going, I can't see any light through a 3-ounce pour, So, but no, that's my tips and tricks. What about you, Brian? I mean, you took my gold one year, so you gotta have something.
So this isn't with the Irish, but for Russian Imperial stouts, I've actually started to taking to dry hopping them with Northern Brewer. It adds sort of like an almost like maybe like grassy, woody flavor to them that sort of like tends to fade into something like more balanced after like a month. I've done it twice now, and I think I really like it. It's like a nice like 2 ounce Northern Brewer dry hop in a really big Russian Imperial Stout. Like sets it off a little bit. I wouldn't do it for like every beer or anything like that. Like would do it for like an Irish stout or something. But for those big beers that you want to have, or maybe even something that you were planning on barrel aging too, bitterness is better. And that's actually probably a good point. If you plan on aging anything or doing anything with wood in your beer, aim for it to be a little bit more bitter to start with, and then that'll sort of age out and blend with the wood and stuff over time.
Yeah, most barrels are charcoaled or burned on the inside, which naturally kind of helps filter some of that shit out.
Oh, that's good.
So you do want to add some of that in. I got to get another stout myself. Pardon me. Fridge just off camera.
Jealous.
Living the life.
Yeah.
I wish I had enough outlets to hold one down here, but I do not.
So what else we got?
We covered brewing, we covered hops, malt styles.
All right, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say we can go back to bias a little bit real quick because I know you touched on that. In that having really clear stouts. So like stouts can be clear brown and still be appropriate. But man, I judge the hell out of it. Like even when it comes in my glass, I'm like, I know I tell myself I'm not going to like this before I even take a sip. And it's like bad that I do that. But it's sort of a bias thing I want. I want something that's thick and dark and that I can't see through. Oh, water is a good point.
Oh yeah, that's a great one for you to talk about. And since I have nothing to add about water, I'm actually going to step away for just a second.
No, you're fine. I can probably talk about.
You talk about water.
So, let me pull up something on my computer here. So a lot of breweries brew with. I feel like it's split, and I don't know enough about who brews with what to really lay down any knowledge. But as far as like water goes for beer, everybody knows that like beer is mostly like water, right? And so quality in, quality out, flavor in, flavor out. If you brew with water that tastes like, fluoride and chloride and chloramines and stuff like that, you're probably going to get a beer that tastes equally like as bad. And so water for stouts is an especially maybe like important thing to consider because when you brew with so many dark malts, it tends to drop the mash pH on water quite a bit. And I don't honestly know if like low mash pH is such a huge deal compared to like a high mash pH. With a very high mash pH, you have a much stronger chance of extracting like additional tannins out of the grains, sort of getting that like dry black tea sort of like after feeling in your mouth.
Are you still talking about water?
Yeah,
my water's perfect. I don't fuck with water.
Your water's your water's great. No, it's totally fine. But yeah, with a lower pH, I don't know how much of an issue that is, aside from potentially affecting your efficiency and maybe having something to do with how the how your conversion is basically in the mash. But I tend to use a pretty basic like water profile. I target maybe like 70 parts per million sulfate and chloride and just call it good there. And I personally try to up my hardness a little bit if I'm brewing with a lot of dark grains, because sometimes it can get down like below 5.15, and I'll add a little baking soda to try to get that hardness back in there. But there's some other things that you can do to try to get that. I think chalk, which I don't think is really recommended. Chalk is super hard to dissolve in anything. And then pickling lime, I think, is another one that people use. But I typically just stick with baking soda. It adds a little bit of extra sodium to the beer, but as long as you're not exceeding like, gosh, I don't know. I want to say maybe like 100 parts per million, you're probably going to be okay. You definitely don't want like a salty beer. But you still trying to want to hit that normal like 5.2-ish, maybe at a minimum, like mash pH. So, but yeah, you don't necessarily need to do anything special like you would for IPAs. Like going back to IPAs, the chloride typically helps add softness. Sulfates typically lend to like bitterness and like hop forwardness and stuff like that. Yeah,
it all sounds like a massive pain in the ass to me.
If you had portage water, you would put in the research. Yeah. But yeah.
I've said this many times, dude. If I move, my brewing is fucking done. On all of this shit.
I'm gonna have to send out my water to get analyzed.
Well, so you have well, Jordan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess maybe I did know that.
We discussed that last week. Yeah, I think we did at some point.
You did. I paid attention to you, Jordan.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
I appreciate you.
I know you love me.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'd like to. I sent out a sample out to someplace for like a water analysis, but they came back with a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah,
just trying to sell me on like, oh, you need a whole house watering like water.
Oh, sure, yeah. You know, you go through.
That's not what I sent this out for.
Right. You send your water through Dan Wood or something, and they're like, hey, let's sell you.
Yeah.
A softener and an RO system and a RODI system and all that shit.
Yeah, Ward Labs is pretty good. And I think the club still has some sort of water test kit, don't we?
We do. Yeah. I don't know who has it, David or somebody. Yeah, you can definitely test your water with it. It's just a little, tabletop titration type kit.
Oh, all right, cool.
So, McQuillan mentioned earlier, too. I don't think we talked about oats in stouts and what oats do. And I know, we use a lot of oats and stuff in our New Englands.
I guess we didn't really talk about oatmeal stouts a whole lot.
We didn't really cover oatmeal stouts. Oatmeal stouts, I think the purpose, and I'm losing my train of thought here, but the purpose of oats was really to kind of add that extra body characteristic to the stout.
And it does, and I mean, if you taste like, oats, the flavor does come through like a little bit. It sort of adds that sort of like maybe grainy taste, but it does also add beta glucans to the beer as well. So again, those are supposed to help with additional, body and stuff like that. And
sorry, let me get I had to remove my meowing co-host.
And there's some places that like do special ferments like oh shoot, what's the name of that brewery that does the oatmeal stout in the Yorkshire Squares? It's slipping my mind right now. Literally, I was just talking about them yesterday. I hate how that goes. But in any case, you can do like open ferments and still get some of those like crazy flavors and stuff like that. I don't know where I'm going with this.
I mean, the history of oatmeal stouts, again, just because I read all day, the history of oatmeal stouts is it was a grain that was used because it was readily available in Europe. and it's what they had. And it actually went out of favor quite a bit in the 1800s and 1900s. Yeah, and nobody really cared for it. And then yeah, breweries started bringing them back just because they're kind of a neutral taste, and they don't really impart a lot of flavor, but they do that mouthfeel, that they give that creaminess, and they have a high protein lipid content because of the fats and waxes, so they can make your beers smoother and fuller. And if I remember correctly, because Matt brought this up, I think, and Matt, you can tell me if I'm wrong, we were talking about it before, and his beers were just a little thinner, and they didn't have as much body, and we talked about adding oats, and that helped. So obviously you won a medal, right? So cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're in low.
Well, I've got some stuff I want to cover real quick. Not that I've talked enough, but for those of you that are watching, I don't know if Debbie and Jim are still watching because we've gone a little long in this stout category, but I am trying to give some call out love to Tag a Brew. Debbie and Jim were on a couple of weeks ago, and they really brought a lot of new viewers to us. And, so I just want to give some shout out to Tag a Brew. Tag a Brews are still out there going strong with all the craziness. They're keeping the breweries going. Debbie was telling me earlier today that, Tag a Brews are currently ordering 100 charms and tags at a time because the Tag a Brewers are going out there and really helping support the Michigan brewery scene. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do my own Tag a Brew adventure. I'm going up to the UP, and I'm going to definitely try to pick up some of the new tags that I missed while I was up there a couple years ago. And then lastly, next week, we actually can announce the show again. This is the second time we've done this, right?
Yeah.
So next week, we will have some homebrew club leaders. I was going to say presidents, but they're not all presidents. We're going to have David Jones join us from Keepers of Craft, our club. We're also going to be joined by Lee McBain and Jeff Burkhart from Sons of Liberty, and Paul Phipps from Livingston Social Brew Club. And we're going to talk about kind of what homebrew clubs do and why it's good to be in a homebrew club, and kind of some of the things that each of these clubs are doing to kind of stay current, and how they're reacting to COVID, and how they're out there building the community. It's ultimately why we're doing what we're doing, because we got into a cool homebrew club and we all met each other. So we're going to talk to some presidents and leaders, and in Paul's case, the tap mechanic, about homebrew clubs. So that'll be our show next week. So hopefully we'll have some new viewers pop in, because I'm sure they're going to tell their clubs about it. We've got some two East Side clubs. So a Central and an East Side club. So I'm pretty excited about that, getting some exposure across the state. So, and then, are we going to the bar after this, or Jordan, you got to go play dad?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably hop on for a bit. I don't know if I'll stay long, but I got a couple of beers to pop open still. So
cool.
Probably around 9:15.
Yeah, if the kid's asleep upstairs, I may find some time to hop on. But
all right.
All right. Well, if you're watching and you want to join us in the bar, we'll be there in about 10 minutes. Kalamazoo.bar. Jordan, thanks.
Yeah,
Cool.
I was waving, I guess, prematurely, but
I don't have any other big news. Do you, Brian? Jordan?
Nope,
Anybody?
I don't think so.
All right.
I got nothing. Thanks for
You guys are amazing. Thanks for tuning in.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night, everybody.